Hey, everybody. So I've joked before on the podcast, I think I've joked about this, that if you ever hear of an investment that's promising an 8% rate of return and it's guaranteed, that you should know that that's too good to be true and it doesn't exist. I feel like I may have to modify that statement a little bit on today's episode. So while the principle of what I was getting at, I believe is still true, there is no long-term investment that guarantees an 8% consistent rate of return with little to no risk. That is a unicorn and it doesn't exist. However, today I do want to tell you about an investment that is guaranteeing over 8% return, at least for the short term, and it's a good enough deal that I think people should be aware of it. Whether or not it's right for you remains to be seen, but hopefully you know that this is an option to you. So I'm talking about something called inflation bonds, or as they are more commonly known, I bonds. Chances are you probably haven't heard of I bonds before because up until recently they haven't been a screaming deal. But with inflation moving like it has, all of a sudden more and more people are taking notice, and we've got a limited time window in which to act to really lock in this great rate of return. And so I want to tell you the details here in a second. So what are inflation bonds? What are I bonds? They are special savings bonds that are purchased directly from the U.S. government. Savings bonds have been around for a long time. These are a particular type of savings bonds. When you buy a savings bond, you're funding the U.S. government operations. So the U.S. government and other governments issue savings bonds to fund their operations. Basically, you are lending money to the government. They use it while paying you back over time. And the way that I bonds work is a little bit different than maybe some of the savings bonds that your grandparents may have gotten you for your birthday or something like that. So I want to explain to you how they work, what the parameters are. They've only been around since 1998, so they're relatively new. And like I said, many people haven't heard of them because they haven't been particularly paying a great rate of return until recently. So here's how they work. Let's walk through this. When you buy an I bond, it pays a guaranteed rate of return. It changes every 6 months. It's recalculated every 6 months. You can hold the bond up to 30 years, but you're able to cash it out before then, which most people do. The interest rate is recalculated, like I said, every 6 months, and it's based off of two different numbers. Number one is a savings rate, which is determined by the U.S. government, and then an inflation rate, which is tagged to the consumer price index, what is actually the way we measure inflation in our economy today. So as inflation goes up, the rate of return on these I bonds also goes up. And again, every 6 months, they run the numbers, recalculate the rate, and then for the next 6 months, that's the interest rate that people that hold I bonds get. So right now, here's the latest numbers. If you buy an I bond by April 30th of 2022, they are paying 7.12% annual rate for the next 6 months. So that means if you bought $10,000 worth of an I bond, you would get $356 in interest over the next 6 months. So that's one half of 7.12% for the year because it's in 6 month segments. But it gets even better because starting May 1st, it is fully expected, the number that we're seeing is 9.62% for the next 6 months. So if you buy a bond by April 30th, the first 6 months, you're going to get 7.12%. Then the next 6 months, you're going to get 9.62%. So if you combine those together for the first year, you're getting over 8%, 8.37% return guaranteed by the U.S. government. As long as the U.S. government is in existence and collecting tax money, they're guaranteeing that they're going to pay the return on this bond, which I know a lot of times people are a little bit leery of the U.S. government and like, oh, how much can we trust the U.S. government? But when it comes to paying bonds, like this is about the safest guarantee that you can get out there, way safer than some corporation promising to pay interest rate on one of their bonds. So as far as safety goes, as far as security goes, it's top notch. And that rate of return when compared to the alternatives that we're seeing right now looks really, really good. So it sounds like a great deal, right? And I definitely think it can be a good deal for the right people, but we need to know the fine print, okay, before we say, all right, where do I sign up? And before we hand over our money, let's make sure that we understand there are some limitations to this great deal. Number one, you do need to hold your I bond for at least a year. All right, so If you've got money that you're going to use in 3 to 6 months, this is not a good idea. If you've got emergency money that you want to keep liquid and available, this is not what I would recommend that you put it in. But if you've got money that is a little bit, it's still short term, but a little bit longer than a year, maybe 2 or 3 years, definitely worth looking into. So if you withdraw the money within the first year, you forfeit the interest. You do get your money back, but you just don't get any interest from it. If you withdraw within years 1 to 5, then you have to give up the last 3 months of interest. So kind of stinks, but when you consider how well the interest is currently, even giving up 3 months interest, you're still going to come out pretty well. Like for instance, let's say you held your I bond for a year and a day. Like if you bought it right now, got 7.12% for 6 months, 9.62 6 months, and then sold it, or withdrew the money, I should say, and took the 3 month hit and only got 9 months worth of interest, you're still coming out with about 6% return over 1 year. So, I mean, still a very good deal, even with the 3 month penalty. After 30 years, then your original investment would be given back to you. So you can't hold it more than 30 years. Like I said before, a lot of people are going to cash it out before then. But after 5 years, there's no penalty. You get the full interest amount. Now, what about taxes? Do I have to pay taxes on this money? Well, you do, most likely, but only for federal income taxes. So you have to pay federal income taxes on the interest. You don't have to pay state or local income taxes on this. So depending on where you live, that actually might be a nice little benefit, and a little less coming off the top in taxes. But one big tax benefit here is that if it's used to pay for higher education, it could be tax exempt. There are rules that go along with this. So if this is something you're thinking about taking advantage of, make sure you talk to your tax preparer. Make sure you do fit the qualifications. But for a lot of, especially parents paying for their kids' education with these I bonds, very good chance that it would be tax exempt and you wouldn't have to pay taxes on this money at all. So that can make it a very attractive, even more attractive offer. Now, what about the limits? This is kind of a bummer. You can only do $10,000 a year per person into I bonds. So you can't just take a huge amount and put it all in I bonds, or else I would think a lot more people would be doing this right now. You can also do an extra $5,000 from your refund on your tax return. So if you get a refund, you can elect to have up to $5,000 put in an I bond. A lot of people don't take advantage of that. A lot of people don't even know that's an option, but it is. So when you consider that, okay, you say, well, $10,000, that doesn't sound like a ton of money. That's not, well, $10,000 per person. And who counts as a person? Well, each individual, but also a business counts as a person. A trust counts as a person. So if you take a couple that one of them owns a business and they also have a trust established, they could do up to $40,000 in I bonds, $10,000 for each of those entities. So depending on your situation, you could be putting, well over $10,000 if those rules still apply to you. And it's each year, so it's something that can kind of build over time and become a really good, more short-term savings investment vehicle for you. So you say, Nate, should I do it? Is this a good idea? Is this worth my time to go buy an I bond? Let me give you 2 scenarios where I think this would really be a good idea and very beneficial, and then talk about where maybe it's not beneficial and where you should actually opt for a different investment. So number one, if you've got money that's a shorter term savings, short to medium term savings, I'm talking maybe 5, 6, 7 years max, money that you're going to be using for something but it's not immediate, this could be a good option, because otherwise you're probably going to have your money in a money market account, high yield savings, maybe a CD at the bank, and let's face it, those interest rates are really poor right now. Maybe 0.5%, maybe 1% at the most. As interest rates are going back up, maybe you'll start to see a little bit better offers out there at the bank and different places paying a little bit better interest. But this obviously is far better in comparison. So that's a really good option. So for some of that short to medium term savings, this could be a great thing. Of course, if it's really short term and you're going to use it within the year, probably not a good idea. Now, here's the thing. If you've got your money sitting in like a savings account, and it's paying 0.01% interest, and you go and put it in an I bond, you're really not taking that much of a risk, because even if you do have to use it before the year's up, how much interest did you really give up? So in that sense, it's not a high risk proposition there. But definitely recommend, if you're going to be putting in an iBond, try to make sure that you're not going to be using it within the first year. The other area where I think this could be a really good option is for those that are putting money away for their kids' college, and their kids are getting ready to go to college pretty soon. Now, if you got like a 2 or 3 year old, they're 15 years away from college, you probably want to invest in something that's a little bit more long term instead of iBonds, because it's so far out. But if you got a kid who's like 15, 16, 17 years old, they're gonna, or even right now they're in college, but you're putting money away each month, each year, kind of ahead of time for the next year, and you're looking for a place to park that money, this could be a great option because, like we already mentioned, there's a good chance that that money could be tax exempt anyway. So when you're saving for kids' college and they're within 5 years of paying for tuition, you really want to be careful about putting the bulk of that money in the stock market, because in the short term you just don't really know. I mean, you could buy stocks and then next year you're going to go use that money and the stock market's down from where it was when you bought it. I mean, that's a very real possibility, and it's not all that unlikely. So in that regard, you probably want to go with something safer, something guaranteed. That's where iBonds can be a great option. Now, what if you're investing for like retirement though? You're like, Nate, I'm 40 years old and I'm trying to invest for retirement. Should I buy an iBond? Well, if it's for retirement, I would say no. You want to max out your 401k, 403b, IRA, Roth IRA. Use your retirement savings vehicles because the tax advantages to those are really big, and you'll be able to invest for the long term. So for retirement savings, I would say iBonds should not be your first option. Maybe if you've maxed out all the other options, maybe that could be something additionally that you want to look at. Or if you're saving for something long term that's not retirement, but it is 10 years plus, iBonds also would not be the place that I'd recommend that you start. Because think about it, over the last 24 years, since iBonds have been in existence, which has done better, iBonds or the stock market as a whole? Well, definitely the stock market. Now, there have been windows where iBonds have done better for a year, 2, or 3. Sure, there's short windows where it's outperformed, but over the long term, which one's going to do better? Inflation bonds or stock market? I would say over the 10, 20, 30 years, it's almost definitely going to be the stock market. So it's more about time frame. So short-term savings, iBonds, great option to look at. Long-term savings, maybe not so much. So if you have questions about iBonds, I hope you'll reach out to me, info@natescully.com. natescully.com, you can go to my website, schedule a call with me there. If you're looking at purchasing iBonds, you got to go directly to the U.S. government. TreasuryDirect.com is the website. You can create a username, password, create an account, put in all your information on a secure system, and buy them directly from the U.S. government. You do have the option, I believe, to get a paper bond if you want it, but I would recommend just going with the electronic bond. Get a paper bond, you're going to stuff it somewhere in an envelope or a folder somewhere, and it might be easy to get misplaced or lost. Have electronic bond, it's on file, very hard to lose those. So that it's just easy, it's simple. You buy them direct from the U.S. government, track your interest, withdraw it at any time that you need to. And I think this could be a great option for a lot of people, so I want to make sure that you know about it. So thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of the podcast, and appreciate your questions and responses. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode.